Destination Medicine is a collaborative initiative of regional training hubs. With first-hand lessons learned from those who have gone before, this podcast is designed to assist and inspire anyone interested in pursuing a medical career in rural and regional Australia. Welcome to Destination Medicine. I'm Peter Lance. Pippa Kensit knew she wanted to make an impact in public health, where the work is needed most. But how and in what role? From her family farm between Crookwell and Burrawa, Pip set off to find out. Across the globe to Cambodia and Kenya, and back home to our own rural and remote communities. While medicine quietly beckoned, nursing was her first port of call. Not until Pip was flat on her back after spinal surgery did the quiet voice become a sharp tug. Finally, Pip's passion and determination made medical school a reality. Pippa, now a junior doctor at Orange Base Hospital, continues to paint her own picture. A rural life, giving back and helping communities that need it most. Pip has plans to become a rural generalist. For her, this is not just a profession, but a calling that was always there. Pip describes to Nicole Goodman her road to medicine.
I think the best way for me to explain it is I did medicine backwards. So I grew up on a sheep and cattle grazing property between Crookwell and Burrawa, about 76 kilometres from one town and 50 kilometres from another. And it was during the worst of the millennial drought. So it was for me, it was a fantastic time to grow up. Kids were doing all sorts of things on farms, but it was also a time of major adversity in rural Australia. So I knew that I wanted to do something with people and communities, and I had this desire to help. Didn't know how that would look yet. When I was little, my mum was also unwell. She had cancer not once, but 3 times, travelling to and from major centres and actually Sydney, which was a round trip of probably about 8 hours, which, compared to a lot of other rural and remote areas isn't too bad. But when we're, little kids in the bush, it was quite a long way. So it was quite an interesting time, and I just thought that was normal. And sort of thought, that's fine, that's what you do, get mum better and we'll move on. And so I always knew that I'd do something like that. I then went away to boarding school, had a bit of an interest that was sparked during my time at school in social justice and the impact of service on a bigger scale. So after school, went and lived overseas in Cambodia and Kenya. And it was during that time that I realised that health was definitely what I wanted to do. I went back and did some time in India and Nepal. And in fact, it was going overseas to see conditions that were worse than our own that made me think that, first of all, I need to fix the issues in our backyard. Second of all, you have to have exposure to understand your role. And then I sort of thought, how can I make my greatest impact here? And so I, in my time overseas, I did a mix of teaching English, which turned out to be anything in English, through to a program in Cambodia with the Federation of Rugby, which was sport for social change. And so from that, I thought, you know what, something like medicine or nursing is far too curative. It's looking at one person, one picture. I think we need to fix the causes of the causes. And, I'd learned a little bit about Sir Michael Marmont, and I thought, okay, this is public health, but I didn't really know how I'd do that. And so had amazing contacts, the head of Sub-Saharan African Sanitation Program and the World Bank Malaria sort of initiative. I said, I just want to be you. How do I become you? Public health is where it's at. We need to think big. We need to address the causes of the causes. And they said, that's really great, but you're 18 and you're trying to solve the world's issues. And so I quite quickly realised that I need to sort of go back to square one. And that's when coming home to Australia made me think, okay, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? And so I did a few other things. I, at that time, was doing quite a few service projects, worked in some Indigenous communities, knew my interest was rural and remote and Indigenous healthcare. And I actually thought, do you know what? You're going to do the one thing you said you'd never do at school, and that was to become a nurse. And so I studied nursing, loved it, got quite involved in nursing advocacy and sort of rural health nursing strategy, and chose to work in some rural and remote communities, Wilcannia, Ivanhoe and Broken Hill. And it was during this time that it was my turning point to say, actually, nurses are phenomenal, and I loved my role as a nurse. I particularly loved my role as a nurse in remote isolated communities in the absence of further sort of resources, equipment and doctors. But it was at the same time that those experiences made me realise that I actually need to be able to do more to feel safe to look after the communities that I wanted to look after. And so it was actually an incident that occurred in Wilcannia. It was a back-to-back 2 nights in a row traumas with multiple people involved, a lot of which involved some First Nations, 2 different mobs coming together. And I thought, enough's enough. I think you've been putting off something you've wanted to do for a long time. But it wasn't then that I acted on it. I just put it in the back pocket again, and I thought, okay, it's time to go back to this public health calling. And so I said, I'll go back to Sydney. I've got this experience, I suppose, a year and a half out there. And then I came back to Sydney to do a Master's in International Public Health, and also I sort of transitioned into a Master's of Health Leadership and Management. And so I was doing that. I was working at RPA. So I was still nursing. I was thinking, I don't know if this is me. I love the role of a nurse. I love advocating for it, but I'm not sure if it's me. And then I actually had unexpected spinal surgery. So I had to make a pretty quick decision. It was sort of removed from me. And so they said, you're no longer probably going to be a great clinical nurse. Your back is pretty bad and you'll have to have spinal fusion. At the same time, I'd been having conversations with the Rural Doctors Network about rural health nursing incentive programs and advocacies and how we can get more, focused and passionate young men and women out to country areas. And I said, I'm not your go-to nurse. I can't nurse anymore. I've had this stripped. And I was a bit down in the dumps about it. And they said, don't worry, you've got work with us. No stress. Have your surgery and we'll chat. And so I had my surgery and I continued my Master's, and it was lying in the patient bed as the patient that I thought, you've been wanting to do medicine for a long time. And so I put the self-sabotage and fear of not getting in and the risk of failure and all of that jazz that every medical student has experienced. And I thought, bugger it, I'm going to have a crack. And so I actually didn't tell anyone. My boyfriend at the time I told, and he said, yeah, you've always had my support. And I got a friend to give me some textbooks, and I said, just give me the advice you have. I said, I don't really know how to do chemistry very well, might have to get a tutor. And on discharge from hospital, applied to sit GAMSAT, so the postgraduate entry exam. And lucky for me, COVID hit, and so I studied my tail off while recovering from spinal surgery. And I was working quite a lot with RDN in the future workforce team for the Rural Doctors Network. And that experience only solidified my decision. I was working for and with what I now call my tribe. So, it was developing programs, looking at ways that we can attract, recruit and retain students and early career health professionals to rural and remote and Indigenous communities. And through that, I worked with amazing people of all levels and backgrounds, including the students. And I thought, actually, you're my people. And yes, you're probably more intelligent than me, but I reckon I could do it as well. And so it gave me a bit of a spring to my step. And I sat the GAMSAT with a lot of support from my team in the end, because I did have to tell them. And I make a joke that they let one idiot in each year, and that was me.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Wow. And so you sat it and in first time?
Yes, I did. So we were an interesting year. We were COVID first hit. We were supposed to sit the exam in, I think it was March, and the world shut down and went online. But they hadn't worked out a plan how we sit exams online yet. And so they said, we're going to have to postpone. You'll have to do the exam in June. And I was stoked because I really wasn't prepared. And in that 8-week period or whatever it was, I knuckled down. I got that tutor I spoke about, and I really put some work in and I put the heat on. And then we sat our exam in 2 lots, which coming out of a spinal surgery was fantastic. It's a long exam, and with a bad back, it's probably not great. So I did it in 2 seatings of an hour and a half, and certainly didn't break any records, but I got what I needed. And when I applied, I went to a uni that looks at the whole person. And so there was an interview, which everybody doing medicine will do. And then there was a very large personal statement and portfolio. And that looked at your leadership, your community service, your engagement with others, other jobs, and looked at the whole person, including empathy and communication skills. So I probably fit the sort of 8 ball in a lot of ways. But yes, I got through the exam and it was absolutely fine. But it's not a pretty part of the process.
No, as I've heard. But what an extraordinary journey you've had.
Yeah, someone asked me recently, will you go back overseas? I said, I haven't worked overseas in development for a while. And I said, that's such a big part of me, but I'd parked it because I'd really committed to rural and remote Australia. But really looking back, it is such a good way to re-inspire and remind you why you want to do something. And I think the why in medicine is so important because it's a long game. It's a marathon.
Absolutely. It really is. I want to move a little bit to the transition from medical student to intern. Talk to me about some of the differences you've noticed in how you've continued your medical education.
I think you go from medical school where you're involved in a lot of things, you've got your friends around you, to then having less friends around you, less extra things going on. As a medical student, I was so overcommitted. I ran the Rural Health Club. I then chaired the National Rural Health Student Network, and from that got involved in a few international organisations and really overcooked myself. I'd study from sort of 6 a.m. in the morning, do my placement for the day, and then I'd do meetings of an evening. And so I actually bought time becoming a junior doctor. And I know other people have said the same, because you are dedicated to doing your job well during the day, committing yourself to your patients and your team, and then you leave work and you are you. So I really want to demystify that it's not all doom and gloom. It's a wonderful job. It's so much better than being a medical student. And I loved being a medical student, but it is tough. You got to want to work.
Absolutely. And to extend that a little bit, if a medical student was to ask you for some advice about undertaking a rural internship, what would your advice be?
I'd say absolutely nothing to lose. I mean, I want every single future doctor to go bush, but I know that's not a reality. I look at it in terms of your clinical you, your professional you, and your personal you. So clinically, you will gain incredible clinical skills. You will be doing more hands-on, more clinical reasoning and more decision-making than any of your metropolitan colleagues, purely because there's less of us. You, in my opinion, will have huge support. Support's a funny thing. Sometimes you have to look for it and work out what it looks like, because it might not be what you thought it was, that you have a reg standing beside you. It might be, in fact, that you're working with a really experienced nurse, or you have a wonderful consultant who you now have rapport with, or your JMO manager is very accessible. And then in terms of the clinical things, you're exposed directly with the bosses so much and working with them. And it's a great opportunity to chat with them and work out, is this for you? How did they get there? Why did they get there? That sort of thing. Your ability to grow in the country is huge. So if you don't do a good job, you're very seen. But if you do a wonderful job and you enjoy work and you want and have an ability to thrive and shine, those things don't go unnoticed. So your professional journey can be very much built and put together in a succinct way, but also to meet your tailored needs for where you want to go. And then lastly, I mean, look, it's me born and bred, but I have a lot of friends from the city who are complete converts. The sense of purpose and belonging to a community is by far and away the most sustainable, important part of their decision to be a rural junior doctor or long-standing doctor. And so I think it's really nice to know that you're actually part of something bigger. Although you're in a tiny town, you are seen, you are very much welcomed, and your patients, your colleagues, everybody is so grateful to have you. But it's also a hell of a lot of fun. I have nothing that I miss out on in Orange. And Orange, in my opinion, is not particularly rural. It's got all the glitz and glamour of Sydney minus the beach, but the country charm is there. And look, you never know, you might fall in love with the community, the people, the place, or someone. And if you're frightened of the transition, I think you just got to think about what support looks like. Generally speaking, you will be so included and welcomed and loved by your cohort that if you are completely new to an area, which a few of my colleagues are, they don't feel alone, even though they have moved out to a location alone.
Now, you're actually intending to train as a rural generalist. Why did you make that decision? Why an RG?
So I want to be an RG for a few reasons. I think, first of all, my mentors and my senior sort of professors at uni would be like, wow, we failed if Pip isn't an RG, because she has dedicated most things to rural. But no, I love the type of gritty medicine that you see in rural, remote areas of Australia. But what I love about that is the autonomy and diversity that kind of medicine allows for. So you've usually got less resources, including people, with often more complex cases in an area where you're probably going to have to work it out. So there's a bit of problem solving, and it's with people who are just so grateful, so interesting. They're not going to present with a sore fingernail. They're going to wait until their arm is nearly falling off. And they're the type of people that I inherently care for, the communities I identify with, but also where medicine is really needed. And I think, all people require and deserve healthcare, but sometimes when you work in a place where they're really needed as well, it's quite powerful. But rural generalism specifically for me, I mean, you can do that in so many ways, where you're the rural GP. With an advanced skill, it allows for that diversity. And Dr. Louise Baker from Cowra said one time that you can paint your own picture. And that has stuck with me and is absolutely 100% the reason I want to do rural generalism. Because I don't really know what I love most, but I love rural clinical medicine. I love clinical governance and rural health leadership. I would always like to be able to do my non-clinical aspect of healthcare. And then I love a few specialty skills in the hospital. And at the moment, those are paediatrics, palliative care and emergency, but they may change. So the way I see it is that if I did this rural generalist paint your own picture, my life can actually look the way I want it to in, say, a 2-week period, where I do a third of my time non-clinical governance, rural health leadership, 1/3 of my time primary care in remote communities, perhaps going back to Wilcannia where I nursed and closing that loop and, being with those patients and communities that I know so need it. And the other third working in a hospital with the team and the people and the fun and the lights. And so I think that it's like the only way I can just sort of have those aspects of my career and sense of purpose fulfilled.
Yeah. It sounds like it suits you to a T. And I love that idea of painting your picture, setting it out as you see it and as you want it to be and as you can have it be.
Exactly. And, at the moment there's a lot happening from the training colleges, New South Wales or other state health to really support that. And I don't know if that's the case in all disciplines of medicine. So it's nice to know that I can be supported to do what I want. I'm not confined to the constraints. My goal is decided by the need in a community.
You hinted at it earlier, but is there a mentor or mentors that have helped you along this incredible journey that you've been on?
I have. I've had many, many mentors. In fact, I think I even had mentors at school that I didn't know were mentors. Clinically and in my career, I've had mentors the whole way through, but I think the most poignant have been throughout my medical journey, a mix of mainly rural generalists, mainly people saying that, Pip, these are your people. They're like you. They're a woman in the bush, a woman in medicine. That person wants to work in the middle of nowhere, or they're a go-getter doing far too many things. But basically, I've been introduced to amazing people that I think I've organically connected with, and therefore a relationship has formed in a mentoring capacity. I actually did a little bit of work on mentoring as part of my research project, and the evidence shows that the informal, organically formed relationships that become a mentor are the best, and formally forged relationships sometimes are a bit sterile and don't seem to be as useful. So I've had the great honour, I suppose, of having a huge number of mentors. They've all had sort of different roles. I think the most important was sort of not always when I've had a clinical or sort of professional crisis, but sometimes when the wheels fall off in your own personal life. In recent times, I've used them more for very professional questions, a lot of which has come from the non-clinical space. From my university experience, I would say one of my mentors is one of the university professors who's one of the few original doctors out there who does a just beautiful medicine. And he's a big believer and someone I can always turn to. So mentors have been exceptionally helpful and so important, especially in the medical profession, because the work we do is, quite frankly, so weird, and the environment we're operating in is complex. And sometimes having someone within that complex network of systems can just provide that validation, an ear, a hug, or advice. And sometimes you need advice, sometimes you need to be told to pull back, or other times you need permission to let yourself feel and rest or take a break from a training program or whatever it may be.
Well, Pippa, lastly, I know that 5 to 10 years sounds like a long way off, but time does go by very, very quickly. Do you have a sense even now where you see yourself perhaps in 5 to 10 years?
What I think it will look like is I'll hopefully be finished my rural generalist training. At the moment, I have a goal of working with other rural generalist friends who will be colleagues, but friends to basically provide for a number of communities in a sustainable way. So, for instance, in the central western New South Wales, where I am at the moment, I love it. But home is between Crookwell and Boorowa. And between home and Orange, there are a number of smaller communities that are struggling big time for a local doctor, for primary care, for emergency medicine. And so years ago, Dr. Angus Brown said, Pip, get a group of your mates and take over a town. Well, I think we actually need to get a group of mates and take over a few towns and make a sustainable way of providing healthcare to a number of towns in a collaborative care way, which is happening already in a few communities. And so, yeah, I'd love to be able to do that, look after the communities who have looked after me, work in the hospital system at this stage in Orange, maybe Dubbo. I love the RFDS. I love being able to, the idea of going back to Wilcannia and really engaging in those leadership opportunities, either at a state or sort of not-for-profit level. I don't think it's going to leave me the fire in my belly. I love that non-clinical space. And so I think those may be my goals at this stage. But look, I'm not sure. Things might change. Maybe I'll have bigger and better things coming my way. Who knows? But I know that I definitely want to be able to do the clinical work in areas of need and keep those skills up. Probably live somewhere in the Central West.
Dr. Pip Kensit, Junior Doctor at Orange Base Hospital. This is Destination Medicine. Thanks for listening. Regional training hubs are supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program.